and welcome to the 2026 Annual LiDAR EFI Cross-Country Checkup. My name is Sharon Young from the Canadian Institute of Forestry, and we're very pleased to collaborate with Philip Edward Shea at the Canadian Forest Service to host this webinar. With that, I will now pass it over to Philip, Forest Research Officer from Canadian Forest Service, who will moderate and kick off this webinar. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Sharon, and thanks for hosting us. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Enhanced Forest Inventory Cross-Country Checkup of 2026. As Sharon was saying, I'm Philip Edward Shea. I work with the Canadian Forest Service, and I'm based here in Fredericton on the unceded territories of the Welstuktuk, which are governed by the Peace and Friendship Treaties. To start us off, I'll introduce you to the general idea of an EFI, our Enhanced Forest Inventory, so that you can better be prepared to digest the content that will be delivered by our guest speakers. For those who are already familiar with the EFIs, I'll try to add some references to new tools and resources throughout the presentation to keep you interested. There are some photos here of some forest stands of the Acadia Research Forest, and I picked these pictures to highlight the importance of a well-characterized forest inventory. Whoop, there we go. As you can imagine, you'll likely need different equipment. You'll likely want to implement different silviculture treatments in these stands, and you'll likely need different equipment to do so, and we'll be producing different basket of products destined to different downstream markets. So better mapping what's on the ground can really help operational planning and the rest of the whole forest value chain. So there can be some confusions in the terms we use to define tools, techniques, and products. In EFIs, we're generally looking at a spatially explicit approach to characterize forest attributes contiguously over a landscape. So these wall-to-wall products. The definition used by Joanne in this important 2017 information report refers to the so-called standard EFI-based LiDAR-based EFI. But today we're taking a broader perspective on EFIs, so something more along the lines of what's described on our NRCan website. So anything that enhances the quality, accuracy, and precision of forest inventory data to produce information to a level of precision required for value chain optimization. In Canada, it's also important to distinguish between our national forest inventory and jurisdictional forest resource inventories that differ both in scales and application. In our national forest inventory, this favors just statistical rigor and allows for national and international reporting and policy making. It's a sample-based assessment at a core national scale. Our forest resource inventories, which have a bunch of different names across the country, use the best information available to characterize and map finer scales needed for resource management. So they're focused on the current condition for forecasted timber supply. And this information is mostly used by provincial governments and territorial governments and industry for decision making. So today's focus is definitely going to be more on this forest resource inventory scale. So there's a long history of forest inventory improvements in Canada since the first stand level management inventories in the early 1900s. The primary goal of a forest resource inventory is to quantify forest resources and to delineate stands with similar attributes so that we can make resource management decisions, whether that's a strategic level, tactical, or operational. We started with some hand-drawn maps, as you can see on the left, and then moved to digital stereo aerial imagery to delineate forest stands more accurately and interpret species composition. And then since then, we've been enhancing these, where now our EFIs are moving from a polygonal level of detail to a substand spatial resolution, often at the 400 meter square cell resolution when you're using an area-based approach, or even finer resolution when you're using individual tree approaches, as you can see on the right and the bottom right. So there's a need for maps to integrate more individual tree characteristics so that we can know exactly how many trees have particular economic or ecosystem values out there. Is this a good tree for logs or just for pulp? Does it have good fiber? Is it good for wildlife habitat? We also would like to enhance the spatial detail of other forest attributes, such as topography or soil wetness, which can be useful, for example, for planning road construction. There's also an increasing desire to map other ecosystem characteristics in forest resource inventories, such as non-commercial species, soils, carbon. There's a lot more stakeholders wanting forest information for various applications beyond timber management. So that's something to keep in mind. And we also want to improve the accuracy and precision of these inventories, especially if you want to make strategic level decisions that can be implemented operationally. Hence the importance of calibration and validation procedures, whether you're dealing with internal products or externally contracted ones. And all of these enhancements can come at a cost, so it's a balancing act. If you increase the level of spatial detail, for example, it might cost more to buy. It might make you have a slower turnover rate, and make them more data hard to balance. So you have to ask yourself the question: what is precise enough, and how do you want to assess this precision, and what how you need to maintain this accuracy and precision over time. So to build a basic EFI, you generally want to fuse ground-based measurements with aerial or satellite products to generate a value-added inventory map that essentially fuse the different data sources and uses the benefits of one technology to overcome the weaknesses of another. The general idea is to use a sampling unit of known value, so a ground truth, for example, and then develop the relationship between this known truth and a data product that has a broader spatial coverage, and then to extrapolate the value to the whole area of interest using the model that you generated. So how you do so will obviously depend on your input data, your inventory objectives, and the available tools that you have. But the fusion of data sets will undeniably require good spatial temporal referencing. So make sure that you have a plan before you start collecting data or contracting out services. So here's a basic workflow for building a LiDAR-based EFI that I'm going to go over in the next few slides. And but it's kind of a baseline that you can imagine for a lot of different applications, so you can adapt it to whatever flavor you want, because there's many different pipelines that exist and that have different requirements and objectives. But not all of these can be called EFIs. Some are still in exploratory research, while other ones are operational and repeatable pipelines. And all the EFIs, though, are essentially multidisciplinary endeavors by nature. So don't be shy to ask questions to people with different expertise and perspectives to make sure that you're avoiding potential pitfalls when you're undertaking one of these. Before making an EFI, it's important to consider a few things to ensure the timely delivery of useful data. So namely, you want to figure out what your objectives are. So that's good at the onset. What technology do you have access to and how you plan on using it? What are going to be your data processing steps and how you're going to ensure quality control? How are you going to schedule these activities? And are you going to be doing this in-house or contracting out some of these services? So first, let's talk about this large-scale resolution, high-resolution data. So generally, these tend to be aerospace-borne high-resolution imagery or LiDAR datasets, or both. The first consideration is usually sourcing these data sets. So some federal guidelines here listed that can help with your procurement. The greater the resolution that you get often comes at a cost, whether it's initially by just an amount of dollars that you're going to be spending, but also the long-term storage costs. We were just talking about the increasing cost of RAM and computer storage. So think about what is meaningful for your objective and don't necessarily go over the top if you don't need to. You also want to think about how you're going to store this data over the long term and short term to make it findable and usable. So some of the limitations also when it comes to the data acquisition of these data sets can really affect your scheduling and updatability of your EFI product. So hence whether it can be used for strategic or operational planning. For example, the initial cost might make it prohibitive to do every year, or if there's weather limitations that like smoke that prevent you from acquiring a particular imagery. So these data will also generally need some pre-processing, which some of it can be contracted out. For example, you need orthorectification or spectral harmonization to ensure a homogeneous, unobstructed, seamless wall-to-wall product. You also want to think about how your data set will be stitched together. So all these different images or data sets will be stitched together to produce one seamless area of interest, whether it's at a watershed scale or a forest management scale. So think about what would be of interest for you and what are going to be these operational constraints. Maybe your forest management unit is too big and it's going to be for a prohibitively large data set. If needed, you generally also want to computate some metrics from these data sets, such as your 95th percentile height percentile for LiDAR datasets, or NDVI, or normalized burn ratio for imagery. So here's some few tools up here in the top left that can help you in calculating some of these LiDAR-based metrics. Then most CFIs also integrate other ancillary datasets into their models. For example, environmental attributes such as soils, geology, topography, and climate, or satellite imagery products such as radar. These can be sourced from open government portals or other Earth observation data sharing platforms. In Canada, we're also lucky we have weather can be mapped for a given point in time using the BioSim application that I've listed up here in the top left. But before committing to using one of these additional layers in your EFI, make sure that you ask yourself, is this a meaningful predictor of forest attributes of interest? So this a priori reasoning can ensure that your model generation is founded on sound science and logic. Stability, and also ask yourself whether products can be stable through time or space, and will you need to update these data sets when time comes to renewing your EFIs, which might complicate their use. Key to the EFI concept is the ground measurements that will eventually be linked to these remotely sensed data to generate spatially explicit attributes at a larger scale. If a feature is not measured from the ground, in my opinion, chances are you can't map it accurately, although definitely top height can be mapped out pretty accurately with LiDAR in itself. So first, you need to consider a sampling design that can properly represent the attributes variability across the area of interest. So the SGSR package in the top left here can help you plan that. Pay particular attention to the site accessibility and timing, and how you're going to collect samples and data in a way that ensure that it can be linked spatially and temporally to the remotely sensed data. So proper geopositioning is important. So pick a tool with the right accuracy for the desired outcome for your spatial matching. And also, if, for example, you want to use harvester head data, then ensure that you have the adequate coordinates and timestamps in the data set for your needs, which may require you to have a data sharing or data use agreement in place. You'll obviously need some qualified field crew for taking good measurements, but also consider any new attributes that might need additional training, or find ways of whether you need some auditing procedures to be done to make sure that these ground truths and measurements are accurately done. Depending on the attributes of interest, you might also want to schedule some timely delivery of lab analyses so that these don't delay your whole EFI plan. And then you'll need to compile the data to find meaningful attributes that can be linked to your wall-to-wall products. So, calculating volumes, but you also might want to grow your data set so that it can be temporally matched to your remotely sensed data. And we have some awesome new products that have been publicly available now and that are listed up here in the top left that can help you with growth and yield. And now, once you have your ground truth and your remotely sensed data, you want to generate your model to link the ground truth to this remotely sensed information. And you typically will need to separate your data into training, testing, and validation data sets to quantify the accuracy during the model development. It's critical to annotate and label your data sets and processes properly, because any differences in the pipeline that you use will have repercussions on the end product. This also involves cropping your point cloud or other wall-to-wall product and ancillary data sets to the extent of the ground truth measurements, overlaying these data sets using proper ortho rectification and geographic positioning. And then you can generate a model. And these can be parametric, non-parametric, area-based, or individual tree-based, depending on the level of expertise and the desired applications of your EFI. Traditionally, people have been using random forest to develop these models, but there's a plethora of approaches that exist, and we'll see how to use deep learning more detail tomorrow at our workshop. But keeping it as simple as possible with at least a number of predictors is generally a good idea. But making these training data sets and models is costly, so think about how you can make these reusable, shareable, and interoperable as much as possible. And finally, you can apply your model to your area of interest, whether it's a forest management unit or a watershed. So using your wall-to-wall remotely sensed metric to extrapolate point level measurements to the larger scale. For example, by plot matching a pixel or an area associated with a ground truth to those outside of the scope of the ground calibration. Large areas of interest can require substantial computing power and data management. So IT support might be needed to help you set up an infrastructure for large data processing. At this point, you should also be considering how you're going to be mapping uncertainty and how you're going to make some independent post-hoc validation of the data products that you have using either additional data or ground audits to ensure that your model is being applied reasonably. And in some cases, you also want to redraw sound level boundaries after you've generated these maps and summarize the attributes of interest for each polygon that you've generated. Ideally, an EFI plan should also consider how you're going to keep your EFI up to date, whether it's rebuilding your EFI inventory from scratch or growing your inventory using growth simulators or updating parts of it using change detection, like I have depicted here. So keep in mind that there's always a time lag between the data acquisition and the inventory deployment, which can be important to remember if you want to use these products for tactical or operational needs. Today's jurisdictional updates are mainly focused on strategic level inventories, but the technological improvement is increasingly allowing higher precision of mapping at larger scales. Hence, there's lines being blurred between strategic, tactical, and operational inventory needs for decision making. So I encourage you to figure out if you can find synergies across various scales for forest management to remove duplications and streamline processes. The idea of mapping more forest and tree characteristics can be further expanded to information across disciplines. Here's a Swiss example where they're integrating multidisciplinary values into the new national EFI framework. Hence, the EFI paradigm is moving from the traditional sustainable timber harvesting towards broader issues such as wildlife habitat, disease, carbon sequestration, biodiversity, ecosystem services, and indigenous values. In Canada, we're a big country with a lot of variability in its landscape, forest structure, composition, tradition, technologies, expertise, regulations, policies, and land ownership. And with all these factors will influence the readiness or willingness to adopt new technologies such as remote sensing tools and EFIs. These factors will also guide your forest management needs and enhance the type of EFI that best suits you. So custom solutions are needed, but sharing information and technological developments will benefit us all. And hence why we have the EFI Cross-Country Checkup, which has a long history of bringing stakeholders together for knowledge exchange, discussions, and in-person workshops. So we're marking our 10th anniversary this year with a special hands-on workshop tomorrow on the use of deep learning with airborne laser scanning data for forest inventories. So please come and learn with us tomorrow on how to use these new techniques. As some of you might know, over the years, we've had two major cross-country flagship programs that have served as EFI research accelerators. These programs have contributed greatly to the development of research and training of highly qualified personnel. As we see Silva 21 coming to a close this year, I'm curious to see how we'll once again galvanize our community for advancing research and development for the forest sector. Maybe we'll have a digitalization lens. In Canada, we're also lucky to have a great collaborative network across governments, academia, industry, and private woodlot owners that have led to the development of many EFI research forest super sites. These super sites are areas where there's a plethora of data layers that have been collected over the years, leading to valuable spatial and temporal data sets. Many of these data sets are openly accessible or can be shared by their respective data holders for benchmarking, research, and development. This is my time to remind you, all data holders, including myself out there, to take the time to properly document your data sets and please consider archiving them in publicly accessible repositories. I know I'm working on it for the Acadia Research Forest. So I'm going to finish off by saying thank you to all of our speakers and instructors for sharing their knowledge and insights and making this event possible. So remember to tune in to our Deep Learning EFI workshop tomorrow using the same Zoom link that you used today. And without any further ado, I'll pass the torch to Tyler, who can give us an update on Northwest Territories.
Thank you, Pez, and thank you, Sharon. Yeah, I'm with the government of Northwest Territories. My name is Tyler Ray. I'm the inventory forester here with the government. I've been here since 2013. Our government has always been usually on the sidelines of these cross-country checkups. I don't know if we've ever actually presented one of our projects, so this might be the first for the Northwest Territories. But yeah, what I wanted to talk about today was our seismic line regeneration assessment project. It's really early on in the development of it. I guess I shouldn't say development. We've got a lot planned for it, but we're really early on in this project. So as you see, as I go through these slides here, a lot of it is kind of conceptual beyond a certain point. We have a good roadmap going forward, some processes that have been tried and practiced in different areas, and we're just applying it in a slightly different method here. So yeah, without much ado, I'll go a little bit further here. So for the GNWTs, Governor Northwest Territories, our seismic line regeneration project, why are we interested in assessing seismic line regeneration along seismic lines? So there's a number of reasons. One of the first drivers is that the boreal caribou recovery strategy for the Northwest Territories sets a maximum disturbance threshold of 35%. Just like across Canada, the federal recovery strategy also uses the same threshold, recommends the same threshold. And these disturbances take into account everything from fires less than 40 years old, which is fairly significant in the territory. That's considered a disturbance. And any anthropogenic disturbances as well. All the anthropogenic disturbances are buffered by 500 meters, so further extending their disturbance footprint on the landscape with regards to caribou recovery. Seismic lines are the primary anthropogenic disturbance in the Northwest Territories by far under this system. That being said, though, caribou collar data in the Northwest Territories is showing that functionally recovered seismic lines are not being avoided as much by caribous as frequently and more commonly thought when these recovery strategies put together. Caribou or the collar data is showing that some of these seismic lines that are classified as disturbance, they're not being avoided by caribou at all. So that's kind of one of the lenses we're looking at this from. We undertook this project basically to assess seismic line recovery on a larger scale than what's typically been done in the territory. We've had projects in the past, usually aerial or ground-based, where we're physically mapping or recording attributes about the lines. Obviously, that's time-consuming, expensive, and it's hard to really scale that up to a wider level. So that's kind of why we're looking at doing this in a more wholesome manner across the territory. One of the immediate goals is that this work is going to help identify where functional recovery is lacking, so that restoration efforts and habitat offsetting efforts can be more targeted and defensible, where we're actually assisting the regeneration on these lines. And why am I talking about this today at the cross-country checkup? Well, essentially, we're going to be conducting a linear EFI in areas dominated by regeneration, so small trees or shrubs, or lack thereof in some instances too. So that's basically the way we're looking at it, is it's going to be a linear EFI. To give you a bit of background, this is kind of what some of the seismic lines look like. So under the boreal caribou recovery strategy, all the lines on the left that you see on the image, they're still considered disturbances. They're never removed from the disturbance data set unless they're recovered or some sort of amendments are done to the sites to actually say that they're regenerated, which doesn't happen in the territory very often, historically at least, or when they're no longer visible from satellite imagery. So clearly you can see these lines are visible from imagery. You can see lots of them that are vegetated. I don't know if you can see my pointer, but one of the lines running north-south here, it's fairly well vegetated, but it's still very visible. It's got different vegetation, obviously, than the surrounding forest. So it still stands out on the imagery. It's still considered a disturbance, but on the ground, it might paint a different picture than what you're thinking. Sure, the vegetation is different, but they are vegetated. The picture on the right shows what that square box looked like. This is where that image is taken in that area. It's definitely vegetated. It's shrubby at this point. There's probably some trees throughout there too. You can kind of see the opening up in the sky above where the seismic line was cut, but it's still vegetated. It just doesn't match the surrounding vegetation, so it stands out. But from a functional perspective, from caribou's perspective, this might be recovered. It doesn't provide line of sight is very limited down this line. Predators can't traverse down this line. You can't use it as a highway to be able to run up and down the line. It's probably easier to walk through the bush at this point than to walk down this line. So access is limited. But yeah, this is kind of what the lines look like. I have a few more slides that I'll go through here that kind of highlight some of what the lines look like. So just further down this same size plan, a little bit further, obviously taller shrubs. We're into, it looks like an upland mixed wood. We've got some big aspen and some tall spruce you can see in the background as well. The size of the plant, it's hard to tell where it even is here. But you got it's dominated by taller shrubs in here. Looks like potentially some birch or aspen in the background there as well. So yeah, it's definitely revegetated, but again, stands out in aerial imagery. Another upland site. This one was clearly, it's well vegetated. We got trees coming back on this line. It's hard to tell where the line is, other than the structure is different than the surrounding forest. Same with this one. This one looks like it's a little bit more moist than the last one. Further down the line a bit more, getting closer to transition into open wetland potentially, which I think is behind, looking backwards from where this photo is taken. You can see up in the sky again, you can kind of see the clearing in the sky. That's likely where the size of the line is. These pictures are all taken from our project from a number of years ago. So I'm trying to remember where exactly these photos are. But yeah, clearly well vegetated. You can see potentially an old game trail that likely isn't being used much anymore. Yeah, when these lines were first cleared, they might have been kept open for hunters and trappers in there as well. People on the land could have been using this, but clearly it hasn't been maintained. It's being reclaimed and regenerated naturally. And this is the final line I just wanted to highlight here. It's clearly visible from the imagery. It looks like there shouldn't be much on the line, but in reality, when you get down there, tall alder along this site, you can clearly see the line up above. It looks like there's conifer on the sides, which makes sense from the aerial or the imagery on the left. But clearly it hasn't been used. Potentially an old game trail run through here, an opening at least. But now there's down trees and stuff across it. Like it's definitely regenerating. It's just at a different state than the surrounding forest. And one last picture here. This one you can clearly see where the seismocline is. It looks like it's in a more moist area, slower growing. We've got some larch here in the foreground. A lot of thick willows and likely alders here. Dense though. Line of sight is limited. Access limited. From a caribou perspective, they might not be avoiding these lines. So that's kind of the goal here, is to be able to create an inventory of what the regeneration status is like on these lines, and use that to help guide caribou management strategies, I guess, is one of the goals, and see where reforestation efforts would make sense. So the plan for our project, I'm going to break it down into 5 phases here. I'm going to go into a little more detail on further slides. This is just kind of an overview. But the first phase is basically going to be acquiring aerial data, basically imagery and LiDAR from a study area, and doing some photo interpretation in those areas. The second phase is basically the same thing as phase 1, just extending our area of interest, finding a second one somewhere else in the territory to grow our data set, which is going to be used in phase 3 to develop a model that can predict forest attributes along the seismic lines. We're really following what's been done by Van Rensen up until this point in northern Alberta. So yeah, reading through his work, we're going to be following that pretty closely up until this point. Phase 4 is we're going to be using that model to generate a set of territory-wide surrogate plots. So we're going to, I'll go into a bit more detail in a few slides on that. And then we're going to use those surrogate plots in phase 5 to develop a secondary model that can predict forest attributes along all the seismic lines in the NWT using satellite data. It should be noted, a lot of people on this call, I'm sure, are familiar with the GNWT's multi-source vegetation inventory product. The first phase of that, or the first run of that product, has been done for a number of years now. We're currently in the process of doing a second run of that to improve. We're using different approaches to do it, but this plan right here really follows pretty closely what we've done in MVI 1.0. So it's kind of a similar approach, but now we're just applying it to just seismic lines on a smaller scale. So phase 1, we selected an area of interest to really collect our calibration data in. This is the area of interest that we selected here on the map on the right. It's sandwiched between Wood Buffalo National Park in the south and Great Slave Lake in the north. We got Hay River here to the west, Fort Resolution up here in the northeast, and Fort Smith down in the southeast. This area was really selected because of its accessible. It's road accessible for the most part, or at least edges of it are. So we can get some ground plots and stuff in there. And also because there's a high density of seismic lines in that area. If anyone's familiar with this area, the small area just north of our AOI is a historic mining area in Pine Point. And there's a lot of mineral exploration in that area. There's a lot of seismic lines, historic seismic lines that we can collect data on. So to date, this is a zoomed in area of that AOI. It's about 150,000 hectares that we're interested in running this first phase of the project in. It's got about 3,500 kilometers of linear disturbance. And right now we've worked with a contractor to fly 7 centimeter stereo imagery and 3 pulses per meter LiDAR for the entire area. We could have gotten away with doing individual lines, but it makes sense for how dense they are. It would just be crazy to try to follow individual lines. This was done with fixed wing aircraft, not UAV. We collected this. We were kind of rushed to get this by leaf off back in September. We ended up getting it. Certainly everything was yellowing up out there. I wouldn't be surprised if some patches of trees. I did have leaf off conditions this fall, but for the most part, we were happy with what we collected. The biggest issue with collecting imagery in mid-September in the Northwest Territories is low sun angle. The sun isn't getting, the days are getting shorter. The sun's not getting as high in the sky. So, and we're really interested in seismic lines where there's shorter vegetation surrounded by taller vegetation. We're getting a lot of shadow effect in the product. So that's going to affect really our photo interpretation down the line here. There was a field campaign just after that followed the data acquisition, aerial data acquisition. The contractor went out, collected ground calibration points and calibration data to be able to assist the photo interpreters with the interpretation process. There's 2 highways run through here. They're not showing up on this map. The northern edge basically is a highway. It follows the highway there. And there's a highway running kind of through the center of it. So that was kind of the road access we had. Should be noted that we're not actually interpreting, continually interpreting like a forest inventory along the lines. We're only interpreting sections of the lines, plots. Kind of following what's been done by Van Rensen, as I mentioned earlier. We're doing 100 square meter fixed area plots, spaced every 500 meters along the lines. They're 2 meters wide by 50 meters in length, centered on the lines. Yeah, with 3,500 meters of seismic lines, it works out to be about 7,000 total plots that we're looking at interpreting. And this is going to serve as our training data for future phases of the project. 7,000 total. It's going to drop down though, like I mentioned, because it's shadow effect. I can't remember the cutoff offhand right now, but after talks with the contractor, if it's shadowed by more than 50% of the plot or something, I can't remember what our cutoff is. We've said not to interpret those. And basically what we're having interpreted in these plots is tree species, so primary and secondary tree species. We're going to be getting measurements of tree density, broken down in coniferous and deciduous. We're going to be getting calls on moisture regime, line cover class, recovery assessment, measurements of line width, and the presence of anthropogenic or wildlife trails throughout the area. It may be difficult on 7 centimeter imagery to get all this stuff. We're using 30 centimeter cutoff. We kind of just threw that out there as a cutoff for tree height. Obviously, we're not going to be able to interpret. We're not going to be able to do stem counts down to a certain amount. So we kind of just chose 30 centimeters at the cutoff. But yeah, the contractor seems confident that they'll be able to do a good job with quantifying these fields for us. It also should be noted that we're getting a single call for each one of these plots. So all these calls are going to be at the plot level. We're not going to be breaking up the plot at all. So we're getting deciduous density across the plot. We're going to get one call for moisture regime in the plot, things like that. So that's phase 1. That's that's basically where we're at right now. This is all due by the end of March, this March, upcoming March. So it'll be great to have this interpretation process done and really assess where we're at and how we like where we're at with the project. Phase 2, we're going to assess the outcomes of that first AOI, how it went, take some lessons learned and apply it somewhere else in the territory. Basically just expand our data collection process here to another spot to be able to have better geographic representation across the territory. So that's phase 2, basically the same thing as phase 1, just somewhere else. We've been toying around with a few areas. It'll likely be somewhere in the southern portion of the territory, but exactly where, we're not sure yet. So, but that'll be phase 2. Phase 3 of the project, we're basically going to be taking those photo interpreted calibration plots, and we're going to be using those to develop a model that can predict vegetation status across seismic plans in the territory. The inputs for that, we're going to be using LiDAR, obviously, as we had collected it, and whatever imagery we have. And yeah, vegetation status, we're mostly interested in conifer and deciduous density and height, but it might be expanded too, depending on what we can reliably predict with this model. Phase 4 is basically we're taking that model and we're going to be applying it across existing air photo and LiDAR holdings in the territory. And we're going to be achieving, the goal is to achieve a set of territory-wide surrogate plots across all these holdings. The image on the right shows current LiDAR holdings that are within GNWT's network. It's pretty limited, obviously, for the territory, but it certainly it has better representation across the territory, north, south, east, west, but definitely nowhere near continuous. But in here, we're going to have a set of surrogate plots that'll help us with phase 5, the 5th phase. These LiDAR holdings here are the ones that are, yeah, like I said, are in GNWT's network. GNWT held projects, I guess. There are other projects that we can tap into as well to help expand our surrogate plot network. I know there's been a lot of Titan LiDAR campaigns in the past that we could potentially tap into, among other projects likely as well.
Hey, Tyler, you're just running a little bit out of time, so maybe a minute to wrap up, please.
Perfect. Yep, this is my last slide. So the final phase here, phase 5, we're going to be using those surrogate plots to train and calibrate a secondary model that can predict vegetation across all seismic lines based on satellite data. Yeah, so that's kind of the end goal here, is to be able to assess pixel by pixel what the vegetation status is along all seismic lines in the territory, or at least have a good, a decent handle on what's out there. It should be noted that each phase of this project, I mean, it's going to serve as a checkpoint for the next phase. So this project is, we're able to pivot pretty easily, I think, change the direction it's going, and yeah, really learn from what we've done looking backwards and apply it moving forward. So yeah, that's kind of the goal of the project. It's likely going to take a couple of years to get to this point, but yeah, that's the plan. That's the end of my presentation. So if anybody has any questions.
So it's great to be here. It's nice to see some familiar faces and to hear about all the work going on across the country. Tyler, that looks like an interesting project and not an easy application with your post-disturbance kind of scenario. So I'm going to present some of the EFI work that we're doing in British Columbia with the Ministry of Forests. I'd like to acknowledge my coworkers, Sasha, Paulina, and our now manager, Chris, who you've all seen before at these meetings in the past. And so I'll go over the provincial LiDAR program update, which ends up being the lion's share of the work that we've had to conduct the last year. And due to that, our forest inventory activity has slowed a little bit, but I'll give you an update on 2 of those projects, and then also some lines of inquiry that we're starting out at FAVE, at the Forest Analysis and Research, or Forest Analysis and Inventory Branch, excuse me. So in terms of the provincial LiDAR program, the acquisition status for this is being managed at a 1 to 20,000 and 1 to 2,500 tile map sheet scale. That's just due to some changes in the and the processing scheme at GOBC, who manages the acquisition and the pre-processing of the data. The status as of January 6th was we had roughly 45 million hectares of the province covered, so almost half. And of that, there's 15 million hectares that are analysis ready, so 16%. In terms of the timing schedule, it was originally set up as a 4-year survey contract. So we're 2 years into that. Given that the province is a total of 95 million hectares, we're looking at 24 million hectares a year. That puts us at the target of 48. So we're actually not that far off. So that's encouraging. At FABE, we're producing a monthly status layer to kind of present this to the public so people can always get an update when they're curious. That data is being pulled from a couple different places. So we have a vendor reporting system, which is an internal to government dashboard. So that's kind of just being reported by the vendor, not necessarily the data is in hand, but that they're saying that they've actually done some acquisition over the area. We have the GOBC servers, which FABE has access to, and so we're able to define the areas that have data in hand. And then the forest information products that we're producing in hand is being published and publicly available through BC Box, which is a cloud-based object storage service for the government. And I'll touch on that in a bit. In terms of the FABE processing, we have a secondary quality control process and also some data specification checks. At the current moment, we have 4 million hectares of LiDAR forest information products published. So we're chipping away at this. It's been a lot of work to build the pipeline and to have to edit the pipeline and all those joys. And so there's a link at the bottom that if anyone's curious about the status, that's updated monthly. I won't spend too much time on this. This has been, you guys have probably seen this slide for a couple of years now, but the products that we're producing is the 1 meter digital elevation model or bare earth model, a 1 meter canopy height, our individual tree database, and the canopy structure metrics. It's just the standard suite of univariate statistics, as well as percentiles, bincentiles, and canopy complexity metrics. In terms of data access, the point cloud data are being hosted by GOBC on the LiDAR BC portal. The address is there. There's 2 options. There's an online viewer and an ArcGIS Pro download link. This is free and open access under the Open Government License. So they're providing also a digital terrain model and the cleaned and classified point clouds. Those are 1 to 2,500 map tiles, so roughly 220 hectares for each of those. And we're also waiting on a forest product download link, which is pending. So ultimately, all the provincial LiDAR and forest information products will be consolidated into this LiDAR BC portal. But as an interim, we're using this BC Box service. So it's basically an S3 compatible format, so similar to the Amazon Web Service. And so we're kind of modeling the same kind of format that LiDAR BC has set up. We have a spatial index file that's available for download, and within that has some basic LiDAR statistics about forests, as well as our download link. That download link will provide users with a zip file, and the contents of that will be the 1 meter CHM and bare earth model stack, as well as the canopy structure metric stack and the individual shapefile or individual tree shapefile. And so that link for the spatial index file is on the bottom there. In terms of the enhanced forest inventories that are ongoing, this total area of EFI for the province has changed, so incorporating all projects at some stage or another. So we're down to 4 million hectares. So last year presented 5-point-something million hectares. The thing that's changed is in our planning, we've changed from doing a Callum timber supply area circled in red here, only because we had more flexibility with which projects we were going to take on for EFIs because of the increased availability of LiDAR. Whereas for our traditional photo interpreted based inventories, we had full photo coverage for Callum. So it was really the only option for that. In progress right now, we have the interior Douglas fir eco zone. We're hoping to wrap that up this year pretty quickly here. And then the Invermere timber supply area in the following year. Those are circled in red and, or sorry, circled in green with the yellow fill there. And then we also have some planning going on for the Fort St. John timber supply area in the northeast, only because there's a lot of fire disturbance up there. And so I'd like to make sure that that inventory stays current. So we're having some testing going on there with handling some post-fire disturbance inventories. So for the interior Douglas fir Beck zone, if everybody remembers the Tier 2, which is a standardized area-based approach for inventory, was presented earlier. This stage for this inventory is complete. There was a big challenge with this unit because of the amount of dead. It's an active fire disturbance regime area. So live standing, dead standing, and total standing were modeled independently. No real surprises here. Relative to previous EFIs, we're seeing a little bit reduced performance by about 10% across the board for metrics compared to the boundary timber supply area. In terms of feature selection, very, very similar in terms of the types of features being selected. The one exception was that for boundary, which was our last complete EFI, elevation tended to be a very significant factor in predicting some of these models. And I should say that these are just multiple linear regressions. We also did estimate dead percent by basal area, which had some moderate success. There's some concerns with feature selection there as well, but we're hopeful that that'll come out positively. So currently we're in the Tier 3 portion of this EFI, or predictive forest inventory, and that involves estimating the attributes that have a less intrinsic or deterministic relationship with the metrics that are being applied in the model, so species and age. And also a Tier 3 involves stand delineation. We've stepped away from a data-driven delineation due to some feedback from our spatial inventory group. And so we're going to be doing a stereo interpreted delineation for this unit. We're also doing an incremental change in terms of the model applied here. We're using a different version of random forest. So random forest SRC, standing for survival, regression, and classification. And the reason why we're doing that is because it's a multivariate random forest. So it's maintaining this covariant structure. So much like a photo interpreter would maintain the relationship between, say, height, age, and basal area. We're hoping that that'll capture it there as well. And so we're just now getting through some of this modeling here and seeing like what features are being selected as important for age, treetop, and pigment indices. So this is Sentinel-2 data. And then the species modeling has been relatively complex because we have this additional factor for live standing, dead standing, and total standing. But it looks like there's some coherence with feature selection being treetop heights, some multi-temporal indices that capture seasonal phenology that's specific to some of these species, and gap metrics. The Invermere TSA timber supply area is ongoing. The sample design for this area is complete. We've again made an incremental change. We saw in our last inventory that while covering the diversity of structure, not all of those structures were well represented. So we've changed this to better capture the spread of structural diversity of the area. We have 175 calibration plots and 35 validation plots that have been selected. that ground sampling is in progress. Last year, we collected or contracted out 35 plots, which was a success. And so we have more contracts going out this field season as well. The status of the LiDAR data for that is still pending. We used an older historical LiDAR data set for the sample design. But right now, all that data is in vendor reporting. So we're hoping that that will be collected this year. And this one as well as a photo interpreted delineation. We will be doing some work on revisiting the automated delineation, but that's considered not really an operational choice at this moment right now. And then I'm going to touch on some of the projects that we have going. One is a forest fuels mapping project. So this is a sponsored research agreement with the University of Victoria and the local municipal government, this Capital Regional District. It's a much smaller size extent for this project relative to our usuals. But that municipal government is obviously concerned about the risk to the water resource that wildfire may pose, especially with changes in summer drought conditions. So they're looking for a product that will help them target fuel management prescriptions for their forest. And so for this, we're taking the perspective of the Canadian Forest Fire Danger Rating System, which definitely is not my wheelhouse, but as I understand, is a whole suite of other systems and data that go in to assign a rating system. One of those happens to be the fire behavior prediction system, which has some inputs that are obviously meaningful, one of which is fuels. And so in the past, that's been informed by our provincial stereo interpreted vegetation resource inventory, where a number of attributes and thresholds are used in combination to define a series of 16 fixed fuel types. And so this incremental change is that we're going to be using LiDAR to define these fuel structure variables to inform the fire behavior model. So things like crown base height and the potential for crown fire initiations or crown bulk density as an indicator of crown fuel load. So basically, we're taking our EFI and adding a few more fire-related parameters to estimate. That ground sample design has been completed. It was slightly modified to incorporate hopefully some signal to indicate ladder fuels. There's 122 samples that have gone out. The data for that was collected in 2023. That's the LiDAR data. It was collected by actually the same vendor who got the contract that year for the provincial LiDAR. So we had a little bit of a sample on what was to come for the provincial program. And then we have some initial modeling coming in, some positive stuff for crown base height here as an example. And we're looking to get that EFI and the fuels by the end of fiscal. And then one last thing that I wanted to touch on, this is very, very new for our group. We're going to be looking at structural development using LiDAR. Obviously, this is a high priority topic given old growth. And some of this work is very well represented in the literature, so figured that it would be fairly linear process. I know that's optimistic, but in the end, we hope to have this matrix of structural attributes that can describe the stand development continuum. So moving away from just this binary classification of old growth, so including things like old growth recruitment and late serial stage second growth, so the whole continuum. We're enlisting some expertise so that we can make sure that this final product meets the needs of government and beyond. But again, this is very much still in the planning phase. We're starting out with a series of pilot projects with training sets, just so that we can cover the huge diversity of forests across our province and the varied old growth values and expressions. So yeah, we've done some very initial cuts to see that, yeah, there's a signal within this, especially for, say, coastal old growth. That seems like low-hanging fruit, but things like interior can be a little bit more challenging. And then I thought I'd leave you with some links if anyone wants to download some of our standards. We're always looking for feedback on those, and the state of the LiDAR program, and access to our forest products as well.
Um, I was interested when you were talking about redeploying the contractor to go sample more ground plots in the Invermere region. Does that mean that you're going to be growing or back growing your ground plots so that it matches your LiDAR acquisition timeline?
It's a good point. And so I suppose we'd be growing because we're hopeful that our LiDAR is going to be this acquisition season, sorry. Right?
Oh,
So,
okay, as well. Okay.
so currently we have 59. That was last year.
Yeah.
And then I guess we have, I think there's 112 going out this field season. So just 1 year apart. And so for these guys, they're very much focused on the mature stands because we have a pretty decent inventory from our results layer. So anything that's been disturbed or harvested, we'll probably be rolling that information into the final EFI product.
Okay, perfect. We have a question here. Can private individuals access the provincial LiDAR data through BC Box or only through the BC LiDAR portal?
Right. So ultimately, I mentioned it will be consolidated on the LiDAR BC portal, but as an interim, it is available through BC Box, and those are the links that are in my presentation. If anyone wants anything specifically, I can just drop me a line and I can send you an email with the link.
That's fantastic. Thank you for also making all that data publicly available. I know that a lot of researchers love to pick the available data sets for development and research.
It's hard because there's so many applications that people can use it for, so it's well beyond just inventory. So I'm happy if it gets used for sure.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for the update. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can always throw them at Jeff during break time or at the final discussion. Well, thank you. And then we'll now move on to our next presenter. So we're going to go out east, further out east to Ontario. So do we have Ian? Ian Smith is here to give us the update of what's happening over in Ontario. Take it away when you're ready.
Thank you so much. All right. Yeah, thank you, Pez, Sharon, and the presenters before me. Really good overviews. My name's Ian Smythe. I'm a remote sensing specialist here with Ontario's Ministry of Natural Resources. My background, I'll say it up front as a caveat, is I'm not a forester, but I am about 25 years in remote sensing, supporting the province, and integrated in with the FRI program here in Ontario. What I'm going to do, I know you expected to have myself and Ian Sinclair along. I'm going to cover off this presentation, not just on the components that I'm most integrated in with the project, and which is the disturbance mapping and updates through satellite imagery, but I'll try and give a full overview, starting with the process of the inventory process, LiDAR-derived process. And then I thought I'd get into giving an update with an integration of the processing steps that are involved in each of those phases of the project. That's from data acquisition, the LiDAR modeling, and then the inventory update process. So just as a broad overview, and you're probably aware from previous years, the ministry is doing a LiDAR inventory using the area-based assessment process. And what that means in terms of data acquisition is that we are acquiring over 400,000 square kilometers of LiDAR data. It's a single photon LiDAR. We're acquiring it at about a 25 to 30 points per meter acquisition. And then akin to that, obviously, if we're doing a modeling process, we need training data, validation data, and that involves our field plot program. So those are the two main areas of acquisition. Along with that, we have ancillary products to support the inventory production process, such as the satellite imagery and other data sources. But by and large, those are the two main components of our inventory acquisition. Once the data is brought into our system, and I'll describe that a little bit in a minute, you have to go through a modeling process, running the ABA modeling structure prediction process, which then allows us to assign standard structure attributes to our polygonal stand inventory data set. We also look at updating that information with satellite imagery and disturbance analysis, stand structure validation, and so forth, to eventually come up with an inventory that's ready for reporting. Now, in terms of how we are doing this process, it really is a cloud integrated process because of the data that we're dealing with. Our cloud infrastructure of choice here in Ontario is Microsoft Azure. We have processes in place to ingest the data into the system, stored in blob container storage in a few different zones: our ingest zone, our raw zone, enrich zone, and ultimately a curated disseminating zone for data. We are doing the bulk of the processing all the way from ingest through to modeling in a Databricks environment, which allows us to leverage large compute clusters within Microsoft Azure itself. So the data piped into those processes, and data piped back out into storage. Ultimately, the data then becomes discoverable through Ontario's GeoHub. And within that, we have a number of data scientists that are working on producing this product, myself included. So in terms of data acquisition, I touched on sort of the main. I'll cover off the three of them here. We have the field data collection, which is radius plot design to allow us to get obviously the training data and validation data required for the model ABA process. That data is collected on a schedule based on the progression of our forest management planning cycle. So a LiDAR acquisition followed by field plot data acquisition within a schedule to allow us to get those inventories out on the production cycle. That data is contract that field collection process is by and large contracted out. That information is uploaded through a mobile field app, and then integrated into our database and our Delta table environment within Databricks, Microsoft Azure, that allows us to then leverage that information. In terms of a status for that, we're on target. We've completed obviously 2024. We're going to our 2025 field collection cycle, and we've got a couple more years after this year of field collection. In terms of how we deal with the LiDAR ingestion and processing, again, this is in terms of getting it into a format ready for our modeling. There's a series of steps. There's obviously our vendors are acquiring the LiDAR for us. That data is then uploaded through our partner portal to bring it into our storage environment in Microsoft Azure. We then go through a whole LiDAR ingestion or sort of post-ingestion processing steps within Databricks. One obviously is to QA/QC the data coming in, inventory that data, check it for validity in terms of any errors or issues in the data being provided. inventory that so that we then have a record of coverage areas, the coverage on a tile by tile basis. We're running our metrics process, so LiDAR derived metrics, over 270 odd metrics being derived. We then, because we're reporting on a management unit by management unit basis and doing the inventory on a management basis, we first assemble those metrics by block, and then further assemble and clip those down to the forest management unit. And all along this process, again, this is fully automated. Checks and balances along that process to then maintain this inventory of the data for the process. So as a status update on this, we're dealing with, as I say, a large area in terms of what makes up the managed forest area in the province. We've completed the LiDAR acquisition, 450,000 square kilometers. That's about 23 trillion data points of data over this multi-year acquisition process. We're still ingesting and pre-processing the metrics for some of this data, but the acquisition phase is wrapped up. So that's and I realize I've sort of run through these fairly quickly, but that's on the LiDAR and field plot data. We're also dealing with a large amount of data on the satellite side in terms of disturbance informed updates to the inventory. Our process for this is within two cloud environments. One is Google Earth Engine, where we have built some tools to extract multi-temporal sentinel imagery, as well as Landsat imagery. We have a process, obviously, to bring that into from Google Earth Engine as an API in Google Cloud into the Google Cloud storage itself. And then on the Azure side, we have set up automated processes to connect to those Google Cloud project buckets and pull that data down locally, at which point then we do some pre-processing of that imagery, the vegetation indices. All that goes into a process of identifying disturbances and creating targeting layers for further analysis. So just to kind of reiterate how that looks, on a management unit basis, this data is assembled, usually coming out of Google Earth Engine. This data is, because of the sizes of these units, becomes tiled, run through a pipeline in Databricks to reassemble this imagery, and then calculating a series of these vegetation indices, and we can disperse this, parallelize this across a compute cluster to speed up that process and make it more efficient. Each one of these multispectral images can run in the gigabytes in size, obviously, so it's a fairly significant amount of data that's being processed and stored. So that's the sort of three kind of key components of the acquisition phase of this inventory process. The modeling and the updating of the inventory, again, is a Databricks centric process. Not all of it, but the majority of it. So I thought I'd give a bit of an overview on what that looks like for those who aren't familiar with cloud processing and this type of sort of pipeline workflow procedure. But we have a Databricks workspace within which we connect to a repo of code. These individual scripts and notebooks are assembled into these pipelines, and each step of the pipeline, which can be run as an entity, can leverage different sizes of compute clusters. So we can spread things, multi-cores and multi-nodes, depending on the size of the data we're processing and the requirements to try and keep that as efficient, both from a processing and cost perspective, as possible. The LiDAR data modeling itself runs through a series of Databricks modeling and structure workflows. We deal with obviously integrating in the plot level information that is stored in delta tables. That information is then assembled against our derived metrics to create our training data for the prediction of the LiDAR. And obviously we're dealing again with a large quantity of data across these units. This is a process that again is being run as an iterative process as we're doing the modeling structure prediction. We are revisiting the R-squared analysis to then rejig our training data or modeling process to ultimately end up with the inventory attributes that are considered valid for those units. It's a little different on the satellite processing side for disturbance. In many parts of that process are still leveraging native open source Databricks, Python and R tools, but we also need to leverage some software for which we need external licensing and need tools that need to be deployed through a Docker instance onto compute nodes. So for that, we're using Azure Batch, which allows us to start the process in Databricks, but also then integrate where that sub-processes that are sent to Azure Batch, where nodes are fired up. In this case, eCognition deployed on those nodes, and processing taking place, and the results coming back into blob storage to then carry on with the further Databricks workflow components. But yeah, so Azure Batch and the use of licensed servers on VMs allows us to have that capability. Once and I know I haven't got really into the description of last year in the presentation, a little bit more detail on how we're doing the targeted disturbance analysis data components, in which I'll just give a rough overview because it's integrated into this inventory process where we're still relying on photo interpretation, but in a targeted capacity. So when we're running the deep time series of satellite imagery to generate not only at the stand level statistics of forest composition from the imagery in terms of conifer deciduous breakdown, pairing that back to our T1 inventory where we're currently in T2, our T1 inventory, the species composition information has been carried forward into T2. We want to compare what we're seeing during the time of LiDAR acquisition and field plot collection back to what was assessed in a fully photo interpreted data set in terms of species composition. While we can't get down currently to the species level with our remote sensing tools, we can compare the level of conifer and deciduous between the two. Where we're finding is statistically significant for those forest stands that there's been a difference, flagging those as targets, and it's flagging targets from time series of disturbance analysis. That information, along with elevation derived disturbance in terms of difference in canopy height between our term 1 and term 2 inventory, as well as some structure statistics, is being integrated into this sort of collaborative photo interpretation exercise, where the inventory and that information is stored in a Postgres environment to allow for the ability to manage those updates to the inventory from those targeted layers, and then manage from different photo interpretation efforts the culmination of that data in terms of sliver management, and so forth, to then ultimately create a draft inventory update. So how does that sort of all come together into our process? Well, we deal in Ontario, we have a number of licensee holders who operate within these forest management units. So this whole process is a collaborative process of doing the inventory, but also having checkpoints with the licensees to communicate the findings, integrate their priority areas of identified change, and ultimately go through this process to end up with our draft term 2 inventory. So as I said, we do this on a forest management planning cycle. We have about another 5 years of processing and production of the consecutive sequence of inventory. So we're currently heavily into the sort of middle of our term 2 process. In terms of data access and discoverability, there's a forest resource inventory landing page on our Ontario GeoHub portal. And so a number of products are available there for download and dissemination, including orthoimagery through web services and tiled LiDAR information. Not all of the data, LiDAR data, is currently available through this process. We also have, or through this GeoHub portal, but we also have a partner portal where we are able to share all of the data products with our partners. So at that point, I'll leave it there and take any questions if you have any.
Thank you for that overview, Ian. I've been keeping up to date on Ontario over the years, and it's getting clearer and clearer in my mind what your strategy and processes are taking place. It's great to see the development. I mean, just a quick one. You have so many quality control and quality assurance steps for the data coming in. Are any of those scripts can any of those scripts be made available to other individuals looking to quality control their data sets coming in?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And I guess it depends on most of this is R-based, Python based. So I think integration of those scripts with others would work well. They are certainly tailored to our environment in terms of pointing within blob storage and our volume. Now that we're in Unity Catalog with Databricks, our volumes and whatnot. So I think the wrapper around those scripts could be modified. The tools within them could be leveraged for sure for those quality control steps. So I'll certainly take that back to our group, and I'm sure Ian would be able to, Sinclair would be able to comment on that.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, because you've done so much heavy lifting that it would be nice to make it the most use out of those scripts. Well, thank you very much, and we'll maybe follow up with the discussion later on. Our next presenter is Maxime Fortin, who's going to be giving us an update from Quebec. Bienvenue, Maxime.
All right, so hi everyone. I'm a forest engineer who works at the government of Quebec. I'm responsible for the photo interpretation team and also the imagery team. So this presentation is structured in two main parts. First, I will present a satellite-based approach for detecting forest change using Sentinel-2 imagery. This part is focused on identifying spatial and temporal change in forest cover and condition using multi-temporal satellite data. The second part, I will introduce an evaluation of a new method for estimating tree height without lying on LiDAR. This method is based on photogrammetric point cloud and aim to assess whether reliable height information can be obtained from aerial imagery alone. So just to set the expectation, the second part is still very on a work in progress. So consider it more like a introduction on ongoing research than a final research. Here in Quebec, we produce summer and winter mosaic from every year using images from Sentinel-2. This represents a large volume of images stored over time. So the question was, can we use this data other than for other purposes? So this led to a development of a forest change detection tool aimed to extract additional value from our existing imagery. So for those who don't know what is Sentinel-2, Sentinel-2 is a 2-satellite mission from the European Space Agency, providing multispectral imagery at 10 to 60 meters resolution. This twin configuration allows global coverage every five days. So it makes it ideal for large-scale change detection and monitoring. The application of this of those satellites, they support a wide range of application, including land cover change, agriculture, forest monitoring, coastal observation, and also lava flow detection. In order to use all the data provided by Sentinel-2, a tool catalog was developed in-house. It is an automated system for downloading and managing Sentinel-2 tiles. The first step is the creation of small preview images covering Quebec, which allow the user to quickly visualize the available data. User can then manually select the tiles of interest through the interface. Based on the selection, the tools automatically downloads the data with a limit of 4 simultaneous download. All the downloaded data is stored in our internal server for long-term access. On demand, the system can generate RGB and infrared product for the raw data. Cloud cleaning can be applied between the downloads and the processing step. So this is done by using cloud masks provided by the NASA. Finally, a search tool allows the users to browse and retrieve images from the internal catalog efficiently. Once the dataset is fully populated, a pre-processing step is applied to each Sentinel-2 tile individually. So first, the no data area are removed to avoid artifact in the analysis. Then cloud coverage is manually filtered in order to keep only usable pixel. Non-forest area are also excluded from the analysis based on land cover classes. And then in our case, we keep only the forest classes and remove all the non-forest type. The cleaning process allows us to generate a consistent data set that is tunable for computing vegetation indices such as NDVI and for further change detection analysis. So I give you like a quick wrap up. So this slide presents you the main workflow used to change detection analysis. So once we have first we determine the most suitable acquisition date within the target period, which is here in Quebec generally between mid-June to late August, in order to minimize snow and seasonal effect. Then we identify and acquire additional images when necessary to replace the cloud cover area and ensure a full spatial cover of each tile. Then for the select images, NDVI layer are generated to represent the vegetation condition. Those NDVI layer are then merged using an histogram matching to ensure there's a consistency between the two different dates of acquisition. Next, the NDVI value are subtracted between the two represented years in order to highlight areas of change. Non-forest elements such as water body, roads, and urban area are removed to focus the analysis strictly on forest region. Finally, the result raster output is then converted into a vector data, which is allow easier interpretation, filtering, and integration into GIS system. So here's an example of a near infrared image of 2022 and near infrared in 2023. So, and then the result of the change detection. Here's our other example of what we can have for the 2024 image. Once once we have detected a change, all the polygons generating quality step control is required to validate the result. Manual validation is necessary to confirm that the detected change corresponds to a real event on the ground and not an artifact or noise to the data. During the validation process, we observe that the method performed well on identifying major disturbances such as forest harvest and wildfire. We also are able to detect certain types of natural disturbances, such as spruce budsworm damage, windthrow, and local flooding. Yeah. However, the performance varies depending on the type of disturbance and environmental condition. So this highlights the importance of expert interpretation and manual review. So I just want to give you some other example. So this is a comparison between the change detection tool and the reference layer produced by our protection and fire department. On the left, here was where the layer is, and this is what we are able to detect as an example. So this is another example for partial harvest. So here's some of the example that we use for our validation process. So we can see that we have detected some change, and we were able to verify with some imagery available for us. Here's another example for a progressive shelter wood system. Also, another little small example of what we can detect from a spruce budsworm. This is not a tools to detect this. Here internally, we have another tools to detect specifically this type of I don't know what to say, the disturbance. So in conclusion, this work demonstrates that even with freely available satellite data at 10-meter resolution, it is possible to detect meaningful anthropogenic change in the forest environment. This methodology is relatively simple and does not rely on complex model or heavy computational resources. So it makes it easy to implement and reproduce. Finally, this approach is scalable, so it can be applicable both local level and detailed analysis in a larger regional or provincial scale. So this just shows a strong potential of Sentinel-2 imagery. So we're moving on to the second part of the presentation. In 2023, the province of Quebec complete a full LiDAR coverage of its managed forest territory, which is now serve as a strong reference dataset. However, LiDAR acquisitions are expensive and difficult to be repeated frequently at a large scale. Aerial image matching appears promising alternative to producing high-resolution geospatial product using large format aerial imagery and correlator 3D, which is a tools from CIF-IFC company, a province Quebec company. It is possible to generate dense photogrammetric point cloud and digital surface model at the resolution of 20 centimeter, 50 centimeter, and 1 meter. This approach produces multi-resolution DSM and dense coherent point clouds, which make it a credible alternative to LiDAR for certain forest environment. We also test other tools like Image Analyst, and we did not meet the required performance and were therefore discarded. We aim, our imaging team aim to apply this method to all 2025 aerial survey. So we want to check and verify the performance limitation and the complementary within LiDAR across different types of forest. So on the left, we can see the original high resolution area of the forest. This represents what we can see visually interpret on a standard RGB imagery. On the right, we can see the canopy height model derivative from LiDAR data of 2024. So this is kind of the baseline to check. So this slide compared the LiDAR-based canopy height model with the canopy height model generated from a 50 centimeter photographic point cloud. The general spatial patterns are very similar between two products. We can see major forest structure, clearings, and height gradients. However, the photogrammetric canopy height models appear slightly noisier and less smoother compared to LiDAR. Here we can compare two photogrammetric canopy height model generated from different resolution. The 20 centimeter product some finer and spatial detail and sharper transition between height classes. Small gaps, microstructures in canopy are more visible at 20 centimeter than 50 centimeter. So here we can see that both the two products looks very similar in terms of spatial pattern. This suggests that high resolution aerial imagery can potentially approximate LiDAR for canopy height modeling in such contexts. However, we can see on the left that the LiDAR still provide more reliable absolute height values and better penetration in dense canopy. I've talked about Image Analyst. So here's the result for Image Analyst for a license from ArcGIS. So this product shows a stronger artifact and less realistic height features. So this is one of the reasons why we are not retaining this this approach. To conclude this comparison, the results show that photogrammetric canopy height models are able to reproduce main canopy pattern observed with LiDAR data. As expected, a higher spatial resolution lead to improved quality and finer representation of forest structure. LiDAR remain the gold standard for canopy height model, especially in terms of accuracy and reliability. However, photogrammetry offers a cost-effective alternative that supports many operational needs, particularly when frequent updates or large area covers are required. So I would like to emphasize that all the results presented are still very preliminary, and those works are ongoing. So more complete and robust results will be available in the future. That's it. Merci beaucoup.
Hey, thank you, Maxime. That's super exciting, those preliminary results. Yeah, there's always more work to be done for sure.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of minutes or a minute or two for questions if anyone wants to type one in. Yeah, I was actually interested in when you're for your change detection, when you remove the non-forest
Yeah.
layers from your image, is that based on existing known polygons?
Yes, from our
Okay.
forestry map. Yeah.
Okay. So if ever there's new forests emerging, then that would not be part of the automatic change detection necessarily.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's all right, though. It deals with a massive area coverage of change detection, so I'm sure it really helps out as a tool.
Yeah.
That's impressive. So is the code for that publicly available, or how is that?
We, I asked, I knew that you were one of the person who would ask this question, so I asked my partner if it was available. Yes, well, we do not provide any assistance, but yes, it's still
Okay.
it's still
Okay, good.
open. Yeah.
So that's fantastic. I mean, to be able to use free imagery and detect the have the some of the heavy lifting done for you is really valuable. So congrats on that development and thanks for sharing it with us. And here's a question from Joanne. Just a heads up that the federal LiDAR acquisition guidelines have been fully updated in partnership with the Canadian Standard Association. Access to the document is free. You will just have to create an account on the CSA portal. They are available in both French and English. Well, thank you, Joanne, for sharing that.
Well, thank you, folks. Thanks for the opportunity to invite Manitoba to this. I think this is our first Cross Canada EFI checkup as well. So my name is Tony Viveros. I'm a senior GIS specialist with province's Forestry and Peatlands branch. And I'm here today with my colleague, Paul Nikiema.
Paul Nikiema, yeah, inventory forester with Manitoba government's forestry branch.
All right, so I'm going to start off, and then Paul will take over. So I'll provide some background, a little bit of prior work we've done, talk to the study area and objectives, and then the star of the show here, Paul, will talk about methodology, results, some challenges, and next steps. So as we know, the traditional inventory creation process can take a while, a few years, and it can cost a lot of money. So this is the extent of Manitoba's forest inventory coverage. There was focus on collection in the 80s, prior to that the 60s, but really in the 2000s and since, there hasn't been much inventory capture. If I was to include the 2020, you'd see an area in the southeast of about 800,000 hectares. So costs, timelines has resulted in not that much inventory capture. So we started to look a number of years ago. We started to look at other approaches to doing a forest inventory, scoured the literature, and tried to do this ourselves. So a couple of areas we looked at in the province, an area called the High Rock Northern Zone and an area called the Nelson River Forest section as well, highlighted in pink there. These areas had older inventories from the 80s, but there was some coverage of newer vintages of inventory or the FLI from the 2000s. And they covered an area that we do wood supply in, called Forest Management License Area 2. So at the time, the approach we took, we used random forest modeling. So we called it a random forest inventory. We had some ground plot data. We downloaded a lot of predictor variables, sentinel imagery, Landsat imagery, did some modeling in R, random forest modeling, and created some output raster products. I then took a few of those, did some processing in ArcGIS Pro to create polygons, and used a mask. We used the NALCAMS 2015, I think at the time, land cover mask to identify what was productive forest, what wasn't forested. Used FME to assign some attributes to that based on the raster data outputs, and really created an attributed random forest inventory, we called it at the time. There were some issues with it because we used the NALCAMS data as a mask, a productive mask. I think we overestimated productive forest. There was also some issues with age, minimal young forest. So we tried to fine tune that by bringing in updated fire data and used the older inventories to try to fine tune the inventory ages as well. So that was kind of our preliminary approach to doing an inventory using random forest modeling. This is just a couple of maps identifying the outputs, a couple of outputs for those two regions. We've also tried a similar approach to quantify peat depth in the province. But in addition to random forest, we've used some other models, XGBoost and LGBoost. And so we won't talk too much about that, but Paul's undertaken that work along with our peat specialist, Lee Fedorchuk. The study area we wanted to talk about or focus on today was what we used to call the option license area. Now it's called the Forest Development Agreement area in the southeast of the province, about 800,000 hectares. Some interest there for economic development related to First Nations. We also flew some imagery, 20 centimeter imagery, and we're getting that traditionally interpreted to the FLI standard. So it seemed like a good fit to try this process again for that area. So the study objectives, we wanted to predict 3 continuous variables, age, height, and crown closure using regression models, and also estimate some categorical variables, leading species, cover type, softwood, hardwood, and mixed wood, and then species composition as well. For training data, we had about 5,000 randomly selected photo interp plots. So these were plots that were photo interpreted from stereo imagery used for training and testing the model. We have also collected some ground data as well. For predictor variables, we've obtained a lot. So at this point, we've got 275. I think we're going to cap it at that. Lots are sentinel and vegetation indices, Landsat indices, and canopy height models, the metadata. So a lot of predictor variables we're using to model. And with that, I'll pass it on to Paul.
Okay. Yeah, for the data preparation for modeling consisted of for the target data variables, we looked at for the continuous variable like height and age. We checked for normality, outliers, skewness, and missing values. But for categorical data, we use the class proportions to see if the data was the classes were balanced or not. For predictor variables, we variables with more than 5% missing value was excluded, and with less than 5% missing value, we replaced the missing value with the median. Then we normalized the data, scales, and centers before splitting it into 80% for training and 20% for model testing. We even did a more targeted variable selection by using techniques like call recursive filter elimination. It's an approach that rank the predictors during the training process and iteratively remove the least useful variable and keeping the most informative variables. The graphs, the RFE graph that we see here for each target variables allow help to determine the optimum number of variables to keep for each targets that we want to predict. The approach aims to balance model accuracy and complexity. We tested 5 machine learning algorithms, including KNN, supervector machine learning, random forest, and 2 boosting machine learning algorithm. We included an ensemble model by combining the top 3 performers along with a traditional models such as multilinear model or logistic regression that we use as a baseline. And the trend test loss curve that you see here for the 3 base models help to identify the optimum number of 3 for random forest and or boosting iteration to prevent the models from training too long unnecessarily, which can sometimes lead to model overfitting. Some preliminary results that we got from these modeling process for our regression models performance. We use metrics like the model error and R square has metrics. And we found out that the ensemble model showed the best overall performance. Random forest and supervector machine learning also performed quite consistently well, but the traditional model, linear model, and KNN performed poorly. So, which highlights the importance of ensemble learning in predicting continuous forest attributes. These graphs showed the goodness of fits, scatter plots of measured versus predicted crown closure and heights. And we do have a regression line, the green line, as well as what we call the one-to-one ideal fits. And we do see that, you know, the regression line deviates from the red line, which suggests that, you know, suggests a modeling bias. Our model tend to overestimate low values, but underestimate high values, which is common in regression modeling, which indicates a regression to mean effects and suggests the potential for model calibration and fine-tuning to improve the model accuracy. This is the classification model performance using metrics such as accuracy, precision, recall, F1 score for leading species and cover type. And we found that for cover type, supervector machine learning performed quite well, close to 80% accuracy with a strong precision and F1s across all the models that we tested. But leading species accuracy was modest, 0.62 to 0.64, with low precision and recall. which suggests that the model, all the models struggle to predict all the species with a certain level of accuracy. This is the variable importance plots for the 10 top variables. That's for age and height and crown closure. And for all model, what we notice that canopy height related predictor variables, such as the canopy height that we derive from MEDA, MATRA 2022 canopy height, and the orthophoto point cloud canopy heights related were the strong predictors, which suggest that, confirm that canopy heights can be a key input for predicting forest attributes. After we train our model, we use the best model to predict on the entire area of interest. And what the map here are the prediction maps for the continuous variables such as age and heights and crown closure. And we do see that for heights and age, the range of the predictions was the minimum was 0 and maximum 131. And for heights, it ranged from 0 to 25 meters of heights. For cover type, the categorical variable cover type, the prediction result suggests that almost 80% of the area is covered by softwoods. Mixed wood and hardwood is less represented. For leading species, jack pine, BS, TA, and TL are the most dominant in this area of interest. After we completed all the prediction, we use the FLI polygons to summarize the data into those polygons so that we can compare our prediction results with the photo-interpreted polygon data. And we noticed that for crown closure, leading species, and cover type, from polygon pixel to polygon level, the accuracy didn't change much. It was very close. But for heights and age, it dropped going from the pixel level accuracy or R square to the polygon level R square. Some takeaway from this exercise, GeoAI showed a strong potential for a cost-effective forest inventory, especially for cover type, heights, crown closure, and leading species. Our ensemble model performed the best for the regression task. However, for age, all the model struggled to predict age with a certain level of accuracy, 0.5 for the highest. And summarizing the prediction results from the pixel level to a polygon level reduced the continuous variable age and heights accuracy. Some challenges that we can note from these exercise, photo interpretation data can contain a certain amount of noise. It's based on visual estimate of the forest attributes and can introduce sometimes some inconsistency that might make it difficult for the models to predict the outcome with a certain level of accuracy. And another challenge that we can derive from this work is that, if we don't have the FLI polygons to use to summarize our data into those polygons, getting or constructing similar polygons to summarize the data to make it operationally meaningful can be a challenge. And our next step, we believe that, using LiDAR data can enhance our model accuracy, particularly for attributes like heights, crown closure, and maybe species cover type. This image that's shown here is we use a DJI drone to capture imagery last summer over one of our PSP plots, the RGB view and the canopy height map. And we clipped the data to the PSP plots. That's you see the point cloud at the PSP plot, and did use some ARS to do individual tree segmentation. So we are starting a new project, NRCan Biomass Project, titled Integrated Inventory and cost benefits assessments that we will use airborne LiDAR, UAV, and ground survey data to do the work. The goal being to be able to generate high resolution, especially explicit estimate of forest biomass from fires, pest, blowdown, affected area affected the study area. What you see on the map in red is we are going to use transect-based LiDAR, around 5,000 kilometers of transect LiDAR to capture LiDAR data that we will use for our modeling. And these concludes the presentation. These are people who contributed to these projects that are acknowledged here. That's the end of the presentation, and we are happy to take any question.
Hey, thank you so much for that update from Manitoba. It's so interesting to see your progress and your initiative to update those inventories that were not being tackled for a while, it seems. Yeah, some good progress there.
Yes, so thanks for the organizers here. My name is Matt Angus. I'm the Forest Inventory Analyst here on Prince Edward Island, part of the PEI Department of Environment, Energy, and Climate Action. I have a few slides today to highlight where PEI is in the EFI scheme of things. Not quite as technical as some of the other presentations, but that's more because we're kind of a user of the EFI. We've never really made one of our own just yet. Just a quick overview here is Canada's smallest province, Prince Edward Island. Our capital, Charlottetown, highlighted there with a star, and I have our forest highlighted on our ortho imagery here. So the full province is about 5,700 square kilometers. And to a lot of people's surprise, that's nearly half forest, 45% forest and 38% agriculture, the rest being some wetlands and developed areas. Our forest is currently 9% of the area is been planted and currently in a plantation. We're working all the time to update those plantation records and make them as accurate as possible as things get cut or removed. We're removing them from those layers. But yeah, 9% currently planted. And something that makes our forest a little bit different, 85% privately owned. So there are thousands of different landowners, all with different objectives. and different ways that they may want to manage or not manage their forest. The province manages or owns 14% of the forest, and 1% in our national parks and some newly acquired indigenous lands. Our top species is red maple across the board. That's volume area. It's found in every site type that we have. Our main conifers being white spruce and balsam fir at the moment. So it's a little update on that. PEI is, we have the luxury, our small size gives us the opportunity to usually get full provincial coverage when we do any remote sensing. So in that vein, we have a very rich aerial photo history dating back to 1935. We have 9 full provincial coverage of aerial photography, 7 of which have been digitized and ortho mosaic together, all georeferenced. 1974 and 1980 are still sitting in hard copy somewhere waiting for us to get to. And you can see in 2010, we made the switch to full color and near infrared. So that was in 2010 and 20. We had those types as well. In 2010-ish, our first LiDAR coverage. So that was done in 2010 and a full LiDAR scan in 2020 as well. And then I have 2025 marked on there. We did get some new imagery in 2025. LiDAR is possibly still incoming. Hopefully next year, another full acquisition of that. So here is some quick timeline of the work that we've done since our first acquisition, our full acquisition in 2020. That summer, we had the aerial photos and the LiDAR done. At the same time, we were doing a full ground plot program with 800 random plots across the province in all forest types that we could. Then when that was all completed, we were able to award a contract to conduct an enhanced forest inventory, area-based approach to leading edge geomatics. A couple months later, that was fully delivered to us. Then while still processing some of those data, getting through our photo interpretation from 2020, we were hit by a major storm, post-tropical storm Fiona, which changed the landscape in a lot of places, kind of through some of the inventory data that we had just collected, instantly changed a lot of that. But we kind of kept our head down for then, and we're still able to get our mandated decadal state of the forest report published in December of 2023 after a fairly long delay from our interpreters. But as soon as that was out the door, then we switched our focus to do some quantification of the damage from the storm. So we didn't need to redo our entire inventory, but we were trying to get an update to that, which is another form of an enhanced forest inventory. Like Pez mentioned off the top, anything that improves the accuracy of your inventory can be deemed enhanced. And then in summer 2025, we've got marked there that we have some new photos. So the EFI that we collected in 2020 and were essentially purchased had all of these attributes. So it covered the full forest, split it into 400 square meter cells that a lot of people are familiar with. It's 7.2 million squares, 13 different attributes of height and basal area, volumes, and then the basal area split into 2 centimeter classes as well. So loads and loads of metrics there. I won't get into them too much, but they're all pretty familiar to us all. I just wanted to show here is one way that I use our EFI. Here it is in practice. So we've got the 400 square meter cells on there, empty, but then the borders of which are a graduated color scheme of gross total volume. So this, to me, gives an instant view of what our forest holds. We can see the cut areas with black and no volume, into the purples and the reds for mid, and then white is our highest volume cell. So just with a glance, we can look past just the RGB color and into, you've got an enhanced view of your forest exactly right away. So that is kind of a product that we use, you know, Not as much as we'd like. It's kind of sitting on the shelf ready to be shared as people need it. But some of our provincial and private forest technicians can use this to guide their activities. But I switch gears here to what we did after the storm. So in 2022, hit by a major windstorm, affected lots of our forests. People were seeing it everywhere they go. A lot of roadside bias to that, but still, we got a lot of pressure from all angles to try to figure out how bad was it? Is our forest going to still be sustainable and all of that good stuff? So this was new for us, was to try to process some satellite imagery. So that was tasked right away. And I show this slide here to show the spectral variability across the island. So we've got 16 different areas there, and each one of them looks very different. So for us to try and do an automated image detection, object detection, which was our plan, we essentially needed 16 different models there, which is exactly what we did. So here is a quick flow diagram of how that's done. And you can imagine we did this a dozen times for each of those different images that look so different. Pick a lot of training samples that tell the model what is a forest, what has been blown down, based on what we see manually, and then send it out to dictate the rest. We had some pretty good success with this. Here was a quick final output of that. Our forest indicated in green, and what the model detected as wind affected in the red. Wind affected was the term that we used because it was a full spectrum of damage. Some sites flattened right to the ground, others broken tops, others partially knocked over, but maybe still hung up. So anywhere that it detected any of those sideways type trees was classed as a wind affected area. This is another product that we did it once, and it kind of sits on the shelf waiting for other needs that might pop up. And lastly is something else I've been playing with is a small piece of software called Segma. This does some individual tree crown mapping based on the canopy height model. And this is the little user interface here with a few different parameters that you're able to play around with. I had some trouble finding much documentation about this. I don't even remember where I heard about it, to be honest. But I'm still messing around, changing some of these parameters to see what we can do with this. But one final output can be seen here. And naturally, it gets very, very busy in the dense, mature forest where every tree is getting mapped. But I did a little zoom in call out on the right there of a more open area. And you can see that it is very accurately mapped all the stems greater than 5 meters tall that I've done here. Again, yeah, it's maybe not all that useful in a full forestry setting, but I can see some applications for our urban forest inventories, which are becoming more and more common. Just about every municipality and PEI has been looking to conduct a full inventory of their urban trees. So I feel like this could help get all of those mapped individually, as well as see some applications for regen surveys and things like that. As things get to be of a height increment that you're interested in, this can pick them right out. So that's another cool enhanced forest inventory product that we're playing around with. And moving forward, when we got our 2020 EFI delivered, it came just as a shapefile on a hard drive with very little documentation associated with that, which at the time was fine. We were happy just to get it. But now that when I look back, it would be very nice to see some of the guts of the model and how that was done. So we've slowly started here to try and get our ducks in a row to be able to recreate something like that. So that's involved reprocessing all of that LAS data. I have it all normalized for height, so it all sits flush on the ground now. And I was able to pull the full standard metrics of the LAS for each 400 square meter cell based on the LiDAR package in R. So that's done for each cell. The same has been done for all 800 inventory plots that we did at the same time, as well as the compiled and processed forest metrics ground proof data that we have for all those plots as well. So it's sitting in two kind of different silos at the moment. Our hang up is that final process of building the model and the relationships to be able to predict one from the other. So still waiting to be able to make that breakthrough on the 2020 stuff. But while that's ongoing, we're trying to update our land use inventories using kind of our existing stand boundaries that are photo interpreted. I have written the ArcPython scripts to fully summarize the EFI data for each existing forest polygon. So that finds the mean total volume, mean height, all of that stuff for every EFI cell that falls in the polygon. So that's very interesting. It's another good way to look at it at the stand level. And with that, we're trying to leverage the EFI to find some habitat suitability model inputs as well. Forest age has always been a major driver for habitat suitability. That's not something that we have in a very confident level in our inventory. So we are trying to see how the LAS and the EFI metrics themselves can be used as a proxy for age. I kind of consider it that the animals or the wildlife don't know how old the forest is, and neither do we, but we both can give you a pretty good idea of what it looks like at the time. And then behind all of that is we're just fully trying to build the infrastructure here, the scripts and the coding to input all new acquisitions. So anytime we get new data in, we'd like to be able to streamline how we get that ready to be processed and ready to be used, which is part of the reason why we're trying to do it again for the 2020 stuff, because we're getting ready for hopefully new acquisitions maybe next year or at the very latest for our full land use inventory in 2030. And the last thing that I will say is with our aerial photography that was just acquired in 2025, it doesn't seem like we will be doing full photo interpretation on that. So we're exploring all of the ways that we can do our automated detection, at least at the land use level, identify forestry versus agriculture versus abandoned land and things like that. But it sounds like we may be able to stretch that a little step farther, maybe into cover classes or cover types. Hearing how the success of other jurisdictions just on this call opens up some doors, I think, for us to be able to get to, is it hardwood or softwood dominated, which would be very valuable for us to be able to do automatically without photo inter, which has been difficult for us recently. And with that, that is all I have for PEI this year. Thank you very much. Any questions we have on that? A couple links if anyone's interested. Those are available online.
Well, thank you, Matt, for that great update. Truly impressive, all the things that you do with your small crew over in PEI. And thanks for sharing those new tools as well, to bring those to our attention on how you tested them out, and they might be useful tools for others as well to use for that individual tree detection. Definitely is probably cheaper than a whole new LiDAR acquisition in some cases. I just want to read this little comment by Charles in the webinar chat. So he says, "Hello, everyone. Charles from CCMEO here. I just wanted to congratulate and thank you all for your forestry-driven LiDAR acquisition work you've carried out over the past few years across your jurisdictions. Much of this open LiDAR data has already been or is currently being integrated into our national elevation products. and it's powering an ever-growing community of users and impressive range of applications. It's remarkable to see the acquire once, use many time principle translating into concrete benefits at the national scale. If you have any ideas for collaboration, or if you have lesser-known LiDAR datasets that you'd like to see integrated into international products, please don't hesitate to reach out, and his email is there. So thank you all. It seems like your work is really appreciated.
Thank you so much for the invitation. This has been a great session. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for 10 years. It's always a great session, and it's a really a privilege for me to be here. And today I want to talk about something a bit different. I want to make the case for why benchmarking in forest remote sensing is so important, and kind of share with you what the power of this can be. So first, I guess, what is benchmarking? What do I mean? It's the systematic evaluation of methods, models, or tools using a standard reference. And so if we're benchmarking, the target is clearly defined. And by that, I mean, what are we benchmarking? Is it predictions of biomass, or is it land cover? What is the target? Often we also consider explicit temporal framing. So are we considering a single point in time or multiple points in time? And what scale of inference are we talking about? Is it at the tree level, at the plot level, stands, or landscapes? Then also, of course, a benchmark requires a standard reference. Often this is the data set. This is the most important part. And a benchmark only works well if what is being compared against is consistent, well documented, and of course, openly accessible. This is why benchmarks often include fixed data sets that may have fixed splits, so fixed calibration and validation splits, so that they are consistently being used by all end users. Critically, they rely on objective and quantitative metrics such as accuracy or precision, or in the case of regression, perhaps RMSE or something like that. Or they may also include things like runtime error or efficiency. The metrics are essential because they allow for fair quantitative assessments. So benchmarking is all about creating a level playing field. So every data set or method that's getting benchmarked gets the same input conditions, the same evaluation metrics, and it is tested under the same scenarios. So this removes any bias that could come from different data sources or different evaluation environments. A good benchmark will also provide insights into the strengths and weaknesses of the data or method that's being assessed. So it'll tell us cases where the model or the data source fails, cases where it excels, give us insights on trade-offs between accuracy, complexity, speed, and robustness. And this is especially important in complex fields like forest remote sensing, where models may perform differently in different ecological or geographical contexts. And lastly, benchmarking ensures reproducibility and transparency. Because the benchmarks are standardized, others can go away and reproduce results, audit methodologies, verify claims, and build on existing work. All of this serves to strengthen scientific credibility and supports collaborative processes. So why does this matter in forest remote sensing in particular? So remote sensing is all about technology, and like everything else, technology is rapidly advancing. So we have new sensors, modalities, platforms. We also have increasing number of methods for estimating forest structure, composition, and dynamics. So given that context, how do we know which data sources or methods are actually reliable, robust, and transferable to different areas? So benchmarking gives us this objective framework that we can use for comparison. So let's think a bit about why is remote sensing, forest remote sensing in particular, complex? Well, we know that forests are very different, and we have many different forested ecosystems that we're dealing with. We also have many different information needs or applications. We have many different data modalities, so LiDAR data, multispectral, hyperspectral, RGB imaging systems, SAR data. We have many platforms, terrestrial, mobile, drone, airborne, spaceborne, and we have many methods. So we have parametric methods like regression. We have non-parametric methods like random forest, which we've heard about today, and then deep learning methods, which we'll learn more about tomorrow if you're attending the workshop. So why is benchmarking powerful? Well, most obviously, it improves accuracy. So it detects systematic errors and allows us to identify the best performing approaches. It builds transparency because results are reproducible. They're no longer just anecdotal. The most critical thing that benchmarking does, in my opinion, is accelerate innovation. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But in this context, researchers are building upon proven approaches. I think for this audience as well, the really important thing is that it can enhance operational uptake, and it lowers risks for end users because you're able to select proven methods with reliable data to back them up. It also fosters collaboration, and this is within agencies, so collaborations between different groups, but also across institutions, across jurisdictions, even across nations. So it can be quite powerful as a collaborative tool. And lastly, it also supports policy because it reduces uncertainty and enables stronger evidence-based decision-making. So I'm going to focus a bit on how benchmarking can accelerate innovation. So because it provides a common reference point that everyone uses, benchmarking can eliminate confusion and prevent or help prevent researchers from talking past each other. So with shared standards, it becomes much easier to compare methods on an equal footing, identify real improvements rather than just anecdotal ones, and reach community-wide agreement on best practices much more quickly. So as a community, we come to a much faster consensus on what actually works. It reveals strengths and weaknesses across different environments. So benchmarking forces methods to be tested under varied, controlled, and realistic conditions. This tells us where an approach or a data source can excel, where it fails, or where performance depends on very specific assumptions. So by revealing these limitations early, benchmarking helps us to prevent overly optimistic or misleading claims. The result is stronger science and tools that are more robust for real-world applications. This one is really critical because without benchmarks, every research group has to recreate data sets, build evaluation frameworks, and re-implement baselines. So benchmarks help us to repeat or to prevent this sort of repetitive work. We can spend our time focusing on innovation rather than recreating workflows. This helps greatly enhance novelty in science, but also accelerates progress towards real impactful outcomes. Benchmarking also, because it enforces standardized data sets, documented evaluation metrics, and transparent workflows, it helps us reproduce results exactly and verify claims, as I've already mentioned. This really contributes a lot to building trust. And even though we're talking about technology, trust is a big part of what we do. Credibility for science is hugely important. Benchmarking also enables rapid comparison of emerging methods. So when new ideas or new data sources, new sensors appear, researchers can immediately test it against established benchmarks. This allows the community to evaluate whether this new data set or method actually offers an improvement, to quickly spot incremental changes versus genuine breakthroughs, to adopt effective tools faster, and give us the empirical evidence to find out whether innovations will actually fail or succeed based on that evidence. As I mentioned, benchmarking, through its facilitating collaboration and interdisciplinary work, benchmarking is really critical in an innovation context because common data sets or common standards make it easier for different research groups or different disciplines or different public-private partnerships, for example, to work better together. So benchmarks provide a shared language and expectations and reduce the learning curve for everyone entering the space. So I see this kind of as fostering cross-pollination, where methods from one discipline, think of computer vision or statistics, for example, can be applied in another, such as forestry, driving even deeper innovations. Benchmarking also encourages methodological diversity because results of benchmarking often shows us that no single method works the best everywhere, but rather that complementary approaches can be more effective in certain contexts. So in this way, think about it as benchmarking creating this diverse methodological ecosystem, if you will, rather than the race to the single best approach. And lastly, benchmarking drives continuous improvement because it incentivizes innovation. So when performance is measured consistently, weaknesses become more obvious, I guess. Research communities focus on solving meaningful questions and problems, and research goals become more aligned to operational challenges. So I want to share an example of a benchmarking data set that we're developing that's specifically focusing on characterizing forest growth and productivity in temperate mixedwood forests. And we're doing this at the Petawawa Research Forest, and we have a remote sensing supersite at Petawawa. So what does this mean? Petawawa is Canada's oldest research forest. It's located in eastern Ontario. It's about 10,000 hectares in size. We have an open repository of data, LiDAR data, optical data, field plot data, ancillary data. We've got a lot of data, and it's openly accessible, and it's maintained. But that repository is not a benchmarking data set. And I want to draw that distinction because I think it's important. An open repository is not a benchmarking data set because a benchmarking data set requires an extra level of processing. It's think of it as it's a value add to the data that's already in that open repository. These data may be harmonized, they're curated, and they definitely have to be well documented. So in our case, we have a time series of field plots, a time series of airborne LiDAR, and ancillary data layers that we're making available. Now we've done the hard work to harmonize the LiDAR data, to ensure that the plot data is all documented, that it's consistent in all the years that it was measured, that we have the field sampling protocols that were used in each case available as metadata. So it is quite an extra sort of level of effort, if you will, but it also is extremely helpful for leveraging collaboration. So we've used these data as a focus for a workshop, bringing together international experts who use multitemporal LiDAR data for growth and productivity assessment. And we'll continue to build on those collaborations and this data set moving forward. So then just quickly, what are the characteristics of a strong benchmarking data set? Well, obviously the data has to be open, there needs to be version control, and it needs to be something that's a commitment for the long term. As I mentioned also, the data has to be high quality, well documented. It should represent a diverse set of conditions. So often large-scale benchmarking data sets will involve data from multiple sites across different forest environments. All components of the data set have to be reproducible, so the evaluation protocols, the code, everything should be open and transparent. And ideally, the data set will be scalable so that it's possible to add new observations or new methodologies as the technology and the sensors continue to evolve. So I just want to end with some key takeaways. If you remember nothing else from what I've said today, please remember that benchmarking is not optional for forest remote sensing. It is really essential, and we don't do enough of it. Benchmarks accelerate innovation and uptake of new technologies. They ensure transparency, methodological compatibility, and scientific credibility. Standardized, curated reference data sets are the foundation of meaningful benchmarking, and they take effort. And as a community, we benefit most when we build benchmarks together. And I think we should view benchmarking as like the key to collaborative processes going forward. So with that, I'll finish off. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic overview of benchmarking, the importance of benchmarking, Joanne. Thank you for sharing that. I see a lot of hearts instead of clapping. So I think the message was echoed and appreciated in the audience. Yeah, I really thank you for every year giving us some real a presentation that makes us think in depth. I appreciate it, Joanne. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to take a second to thank everyone for attending the workshop this year, and especially our panelists. It's always really insightful to have you present. I want to give the last word to Piotr, who wants to talk a little bit of our national LiDAR repository.
It is a repository. It is a repository. It will just take it will be a minute. I just want to remind everyone or introduce to some of you this repository that we aim to maintain. And this repository, it contains information about airborne LiDAR coverage in Canada. It is a GitHub repository, but it's a website that you can quickly go to see what the areas with LiDAR data we currently have in Canada. There are some stats. There are mainly maps. And of course, the most important thing, there's this beautiful animation that took me 2 days to create. It updates the site. I aim to update it twice a year, once a year. Some of you receive emails from me asking me to send me new coverage data, which I realize are very annoying, but that's the work I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep this website updated. For me, it's very, very impressive to see how these numbers grow and how much coverage we actually have. If you look at the managed forest only, it's almost 72%. So it's really, really impressive. And the coverage maps, if you go to multi-temporal data, you will also see that there is more and more of areas in Canada that already have more than one LiDAR, and that opens a lot of new possibilities related to growth that John also mentioned. Yeah, so that's it. Please let me know if you have any feedback or if there's any data that is missing. I'm always happy to add more. Thank you.
Thanks for that impressive work, Piotr. I know it's not easy to keep that page updated and yeah, and just to set it up in the first place. So thank you very much for those efforts. It's really appreciated, I think, for a lot of people who want to get a bigger picture of what's happening across Canada. And so yeah, if any jurisdictions want to send their links to their open portals to Piotr, if that's the way to share, or if there's other ways to share new data that's being acquired, then please reach out. Yeah, we really appreciate it. We're here to share information and our knowledge, and that's what's great about this this event. I see a comment by David who was impressed by how many groups are working towards standardization based on our available resources. I don't know of any platforms for properly sharing all of the data sets that all the jurisdictions have. The federal government, obviously, we have the National Forest Information System, which is a good place that helps us share some data that's standardized across Canada, such as a multi-agency ground plot database or CAS-free, so these harmonized data sets or NTEMs. But individually, I think there would be too much data to have in one location. But it's something that we might have to scratch our heads about how we can have a list of links so that people can more easily access all these data sets and know where to find them. So it's something that is now on my mind, and that we'll definitely bring up to some of our discussions. I hope that we can keep on keep this dialogue open. Thank you for all for sharing. Hope to see you all tomorrow for the EFI using deep learning workshop. It will be a lot of information coming at us, a lot of new information, but I'm sure that we're going to learn a lot. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.